Hi, I'm Seamless, and today is still Tuesday, which means it's actually still time for an FL Studio 12 basic tutorial. This one's going to be about the piano roll. So, the piano roll is there's a bunch of ways to get to it. If you have a melodic instrument like this, so pleasant. You can either right-click on it and say piano roll, which is the way that I tend to do it, or you can actually open up the piano roll manually by clicking on the little piano icon up here. And I'm sure there's a shortcut. F7 opens it up, bam, and then you got this. What we're looking at right now is actually the sequencer left over from when a second ago I did this. Because in FL12, you can actually have the sequencer and the piano roll open at the same time, and they'll both have the same business. So what we're looking at is sequencer positions, like steps, and then when I delete the steps, we see them muted inside the piano roll. But we ain't going to use that, because this is something different. The basic functionality of the piano roll is pretty self-explanatory. You know, you put down, click, left click to put down a note, right click to delete a note, and you can also grab the side of the note to change its length. There's actually a special setting in, I believe it's edit, where you could say allow resizing from the left, because if this was not on, you would not be able to change it from the left and only be able to change it from the right. So I tend to have that on just because it's pretty neat. There are other helpers activated inside the piano roll, which I think now they're on by default. They didn't used to be, and I'm not totally sure, because when I installed FL12, I actually migrated the settings I have from FL11. Helpers include things like, let's actually go to the helpers thing. Woo. Note grid highlights, which is where we're seeing these black keyed, white keyed differences across the grid. So we can tell, because if that wasn't there, we just get this flat, pretty regular looking piano roll where you can still see, you know, where the note is over here and all, but it's not as clear and obvious and fast, you know, if you're trying to get things down helpfully, hence helpers. Other stuff like note length and note properties, pretty cool stuff. You see that's what this line is right there. If I get rid of that, bang, it wouldn't be there. It's more of a visual cue than anything else. Ghost channel and editable ghosts. Pretty cool stuff now, because if I had two of these, let's say they're different sounds now, and I went in here and I put down a note, you see that we can actually see the other channel in there. So if we have two things in the same pattern, we can edit them both and see them going on. Now, if you want to switch between the two channels from inside the piano roll, there's a number of ways to do that. You can go up here and actually pick which thing you're looking at inside there. There's also, these are the properties for the note levels down here. By default, it shows velocity, which is pretty straightforward. If you right-click this panel, you get the exact same menu, which is up here. And it shows instead of velocity, we can affect release, mod X and Y, fine pitch, and panning on the note, and also the channel parameters. And the channel parameters are these guys up here. That's the panning, the volume, and then also the pitch inside the channel settings up here. That's what those control. Now, if you wanted to switch between those two things without using that, what you could do is you could double right-click on the ghost, and it'll go there. But that's what if you want to actually be in there to do main editing. Now, you don't actually have to do that, because you can actually just straight up edit the ghosts, which is really cool. I am super happy with that. Just can't add a new note. So if I want to add a new note, I have to go double right-click, go in there, do that, and there you go. Now, there are a bunch of other tools. I'm using the pencil tool right now, which puts down a note, and then I can drag a single note around. You might have noticed that when I was holding it, a little timer thing appeared. And in FL12 and also in FL11, there are hold commands, where if you hold it for too long, it'll do something. In this case, it turned it into a slide note, which I actually think is pretty valuable, because in terms of the things I want to change in between the notes, that's one of the more common ones. However, if you didn't want to do that, you can disable that inside the general settings. There's a command for that. Actually, it's over here somewhere. Click and hold in special gesture features. Special gesture features. Wow. Functions, that's what it says. That's what that is. If you want to get rid of that, that's where you do that. However, the way that you do that normally, a slide note, by the way, is this thing where if you have it on, okay, that's what happens when you have a note that's already on. If you click and hold it, it makes a duplicate, and then you can move it. Put down a new note and hold it, it puts down a slide note. There you go. I'm learning things. Let's have a little bit more of a longer sound for this one. So this slide note, the coolness of slide notes is that they themselves don't make sound. If I were to play them, they exist only to modify current notes. This is actually one of the really primary awesome things about FL Studio's piano roll architecture is that they have these slide notes, and they only work with FL native plugins, which is to say the native version of Harmor, the native version of Citrus and 3x OSC, and that kind of thing. It does not work for things like VSTs, third-party VSTs, or even the VST versions of FL's own things. It has to be the actual main FL version of the plugin. So it slides to the note that you put it at, and it slides at the speed of the note itself. So if I made it really fast, it does lots of cool stuff. Slide notes, however, don't just slide pitch. They also slide other parameters, like the volume. It slides pretty much any parameter a note could have. And if you want to see all of them, instead of just looking at this, you can actually double-click on the note and you get the note properties panel. We have a lot of stuff. You can see you can also turn on and off either the slide note or the portamento mode, which is kind of like a slide note, but it behaves a bit differently. It's actually a regular note, but it adds portamento for the note, just that one note. We have the panning, the volume, release, and mod X and Y and pitch, and we can have all these be different, and it'll slide up to all those parameters at the duration that the note is itself. Mod X and Y applies to plugins that actually have X and Y controls, like Harmor. So if I went here and I went to the mod X control, and they were both two different things, and then we went to the Harmor that I was using, you see that nothing is happening for some reason. I think it's probably because I'm not linking this to anything. Note modulation X. You should be doing, I know why. Because it doesn't actually move the parameter, but it does change its value. So watch what happens when I, for example, link it to the filter. So you can hear the filter, it works. I'm going to map it to modulation X. There. You can see it doing it. And so what it's essentially doing is that it's changing the parameter offset from where the parameter is. So if I move it down here, or up here, you can see that its center point changes of where this middle value is. So the center value is just wherever that parameter is to begin with. That's what that does. It's actually been kind of a long time since I've used that as a parameter. Once upon a time, that's actually how I used to do bass modulations, long before I ever made projects for FL Studio. So that can be kind of a cool thing in general. But traditionally, it's just used as a pitch bend, and with the two parameters like volume or something. That's the pretty most basic application of that. In our tools, we have the paint. We have the paint modes. There's two different kinds of paint modes. We have poly paint mode and mono paint mode. Mono paint mode will delete other parameters. This is a slide note right now, so it's not deleting everything. And it also mutes notes instead of deleting them. You hold down Shift, or Alt is it? Well, Alt gives us the playback. Alt right click gives us the manual playback of the notes that we have involved in there, which you can also access up here, I believe. Yeah, right there. A lot of these parameters up here have either hold commands, keyboard shortcuts, or straight up other just things. So if we actually get rid of these, why can't I get rid of these? You're making me have to click on it manually? You're weird. The paint tools have very specific parameters and very specific applications, and I actually tend not to use them all that often. However, it can be helpful for when I have like a note and I want to have a lot of those. So just wee right there, that kind of thing. Because it doesn't really work with paint mode. I mean, it does work, but not as effectively. Yeah, I could be doing that, but yeah. This command here is Control B. What I just did there, what it does is that it takes what you select and it pastes it immediately after the end of that selection. Be careful though, if you have a time selection, which you can do up here to create a loop, and then you select something inside the loop and you Control B it, it'll control it as if the loop were the time selection. So if you're going to be Control B in it, make sure that you're not inside a larger time selection for that particular parameter. There's also a cut tool. Cut tool is pretty self-explanatory. It cuts notes. Have to actually go there to do that one, apparently. Whee! Good times. If you hold down Shift, it won't do the angle. I'll just do it normally. Also, another cool Shift command is if you hold down Shift and you grab two notes by their end there, you can do that, which is really neat. What else we got? Just delete, mute notes. You can do mute manually and unmute the notes. Just I guess if you want them to be there but not to make sound, that's a good way of doing that. Then it'll unmute them if they're muted. And the selection tool, which is just there to select, but you can do that selection just by holding down Control. Actually, I really like how these buttons are up here when I'm doing that, because now you can see when I'm holding down parameters. Control. There's also Shift Control, where I can select individual notes to like link to stuff. And notice that when I do that, this thing shows up. This thing, well, does this. If you hold down Alt, it'll snap automatically. If you disable Alt, if you just don't hold Alt, it will just do smooth, no snap control. But Alt will actually keep it flat and snap stuff. So that can be handy. That can be pretty handy. I enjoy that a lot. What else is fun? Oh yeah, so the slide, there's this zoom tool, and essentially if you select an area, it'll zoom to that as being like the main full-on thing. And now here you notice in this particular keyboard configuration, if we zoom in far enough, we can actually see all the individual parameters on each individual note. I super rarely ever zoom in that far, but that's a pretty cool thing to do. Also, you might have noticed that I have rounded notes on. I think by default the square notes are on, but I like the rounded notes, so that's what I do. There's also a bunch of other view options in here, different kinds of things you could do. You can also change the grid color. I don't ever do that, but you can. You can change your snap up here. You can also click on this to change your snap, and this will change the grid so that you can change how you're looking at your thing. You can keep it aligned, and line is where you zoom out, and the lines will get smaller and smaller. But if you zoom in, they get more, and then you have higher snap, and so that's what that's about. You usually keep it at 1/2, but that gets kind of hard, like when you're trying to do like a time stretch, a time like link, because it's like very loose and granular. But if you get used to it, it's kind of okay. It's not that big a deal. There's also a whole bunch of tools for the piano roll. Things like the riff machine, the articulator, quantizing, chopping, gluing, arpeggiator, strums, flams, claw machines, limits. The limit is key limiting. What that does is that if you select you select a group of notes and you pick a key, and it'll force all the notes to be in that key. And flip and randomize and scaling levels and LFO. LFO mode is awesome. LFO mode changes. So watch this. First I'm gonna go to chop. To chop everything, we can make it like really big, like that. Yeah. See, that's what the chop does right there. And you have various controls over that, but not really that big a deal. Absolute pattern, group notes. I don't know group notes. Grouping is where if you select a note, like amount of notes, I think it's Control G. That's not what I want to do. That was glue, but that's the glue command. Must be Shift G. Yeah. Now they're groups. So now they move all together all at once. But I believe Shift G undoes that. Also notice when I select it, it's selecting them all at once. There you go. Okay, maybe not. Whatever. They're a group now. Maybe it's Alt G. No, Alt G is. It totally was Alt G. Awesome. Short keyboard shortcuts. So now that I've done this, let's go to the LFO tool because it's fun. It's a lot of fun. Look at that. In case you ever wanted to do this, you totally can. Notice that the darkness and the color changes when you have lighter or quieter amounts. Ain't that a pretty visual? That's a little bit more stark. So yeah, you have that going on. And let's see what else. You have the articulator and the randomizers and all those kinds of things. They have various options for just making them ridiculous. You have time distortion. This is really cool because this is like interesting granular effects, which we can't hear because it's not sharp. But you can kind of see what I'm doing. And you can. I like that you can also preview what you're doing without it being a real thing, because you can just click out and then undo it, and then you're fine. So Control G, by the way, is gluing, and what that does is that if multiple similar notes are right next to each other and they're touching, it'll glue them together. So right now, notice that it's not doing it. However, there's another command called the auto legato, which is Alt L, which automatically takes the notes and goes to the next finished note, to the next note. A bit of variation in that and whatever. So you can really humanize some things automatically without really trying super hard to do it yourself. Although I typically prefer to do it myself. So Alt L and then Control G. I just made a whole bunch of single notes become one note with keyboard shortcuts. And I do that kind of a lot if I'm testing some things. That'll be sort of how I handle things. So the last thing that I want to show that I still think is kind of a basic idea. There's a lot of there's more stuff you can do with the piano roll that is actually stuff I would consider to be advanced. In fact, I think we're pretty far beyond like the basic usage of it, because you could do a lot of the stuff that the advanced stuff could do just kind of on your own, just manually. But the advanced stuff is more about how to automate certain ridiculous processes. So we'll cover that in the future video. But for now, I want to talk about the colors. So note colors. If you click on this green business here, you can see that there's actually a whole bunch of different colors. But these all have different things. Not only are they numbered and a different color, they also have a particular process for these. And I believe this is specifically for Harmor. This shows up like this. So you have ARP priority, inverted legato, inverted porta, filter frequency. If you don't want to link filter frequency to the inside Harmor to velocity, which you can do, you can link it here and just do that as an entirely separate thing, which is pretty cool. Among this, these represent different MIDI channels, so the 16 MIDI channels. So if you have something like contact and multiple instruments, you can actually have multiple instruments in the same pattern, because you could say, okay, this is one entire MIDI channel, and that's another entire MIDI channel. So this could be like a cello, and that could be a violin, but you're in the same piano roll. You're editing them together. So that's what that's for. Not only that, but because they're separate voices from the same synth, you can bend them in different directions with pitch bending, which you could not do if you're doing a chord with the other type. And I'll actually show you what it's like with a normal chord with normal movement. What I mean by that is if I were just doing all green notes and I had a chord and I had a bend, the bend will bend all of them all at once. Versus if these were all individual MIDI channels. Actually, can we do this in here? Yes, we can. That's actually really good. I don't believe you could do that in FL11. So now they're all different notes. So let's say that I want to actually do something clever with this. So here's a C major chord. Oops. C major chord. And I'm going to turn this into what? Some kind of funky inversion. So let's move this guy up here. Notice I'm doing the hold time command for it to move around. There. I'm going to turn this into a G sharp power chord. And notice that when I try to do it to a note that was already there, it just cloned it. You have to hold it down when you first put the note for it to turn into a slide note. All right. So you can do weird stuff like that. This is actually something you could have done in FL11. And actually, I'll think just about every FL since they started doing note colors, which I don't really remember when they did that, because that wasn't even something I tried to do until very recently. It just wasn't something that occurred to me that you could do. But you can. So that's what that's all about. Anyway, yeah, that's actually a lot more than just basic functionality, but that's pretty good functionality. There's actually a lot more things that you can do with notes, with voices, that is not limited to just a piano roll. That actually has to do with other plugins and other areas of FL's influence. And we'll definitely cover those in ensuing videos. So stay tuned. How many of you actually know what tuning means? You know, it's like that. People are always talking about how kids are not going to understand that like the save icon on things. Like this doesn't even have a save icon, but actually, you know, Edison has a save icon. Let me look at Edison. Is actually poignant what I'm trying to talk about here. Boink. Save icon. What is that shape? If you're young, you might know just because someone told you. You may have encountered it somehow, but that's a floppy disk. That's a storage medium. That's what that means. Floppy disks. So tuning, like stay tuned, that kind of thing, that's because like radios, you'd have to tune TV channels, and I guess also radios to stay tuned to a radio. So like analog radio and television require tuning. How many of you knew that? Actually, I'm pretty sure most of you knew that, because radio is still a thing. But that's one of those things that as time progresses isn't going to be a thing. So funky. But please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. If you have any questions about this, let me know. And as usual, have a nice day.